Hello, and welcome everyone to Collecting in Crisis, Responsive Collecting in a Digital Age. I see that we're still getting some people popping in, but I think we have so much to talk about that we're going to go ahead and get started. I am your host and moderator, Allison Tolman, Vice President of Collections at the Maryland Historical Society. We have some wonderful panelists today to talk about building and maintaining responsive collecting initiatives. But first, I wanted to mention a few things. We are utilizing Zoom webinars to produce this program today. In an effort to run a smooth live performance, your audio and video capabilities have been removed. You are, however, still able to engage with us during the program using the chat icon at the bottom of your screen. By clicking on the three dots above the text box, you can choose who to send your message to, though the default will be to send it to the whole group. Give it a try. Type in your first name and tell everyone where you are watching from today and what institution you're representing. We also encourage you to ask questions at any time during the next hour by clicking the little Q&A icon, also located at the bottom of your screen. A box will appear and you can type in your question. We will select several of these questions to ask our panelists at the end of the webinar. We also want to let you know that this program is being recorded and will be made available to you to rewatch in the next few days. We will communicate the release to you in a follow-up email. Any questions that are not answered throughout this program will also be answered and sent in that follow-up email. So we have some wonderful panelists today. We have Siobhan Hagan, who is the Memory Lab Network Project Manager at the DC Public Library. We also have Catherine Mayfield, who is the France Merrick Director at the H. Furlong Baldwin Library at the Maryland Historical Society. Paige Newman is the Manuscript Collections Curator at the Virginia Museum of History and Culture. And Jennifer Peebles is the University Archivist and Special Collections Librarian at Salisbury University. So what is responsive collecting? Also known as rapid response collecting and urgent response collecting, it is trying to collect history in the wake of a disaster, crisis, or at any other potentially historic moment, big or small, good or bad, in your communities. Some of the challenges we face right now is that, well, here we all are coming to you from our homes. I mean, we're all working, networking from home. Many institutions have to work remotely. Timing is also crucial as conditions and life changes every day. This forces us to pivot and grow our audience engagement strategies. The 4 projects that we are using as case studies during this webinar are Collecting in Quarantine Project at the Maryland Historical Society, Archive This Moment DC at the DC Public Library, the COVID-19 Collection at the NAB Center at Salisbury University, and Share Your Story, Documenting COVID-19 in Virginia at the Virginia Museum of History and Culture. Catherine Mayfield, could you talk to us about the Maryland Historical Society's initiative?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. So at the Maryland Historical Society, we have kind of an umbrella initiative called Collecting in Quarantine. And this initiative has 2 different sub-projects. So one of them is called Letters from the Homefront, and the other one is Business Unusual. So Letters from the Homefront, what we're doing here is we're calling for personal accounts documenting Marylanders' experiences of this time. And this was inspired by the idea of historical letters, diaries, and images from our collection, as well as various moments and events in our state and national history. So many of the submissions are coming through in written form, but we've also seen photographs, drawings, and other types of submissions. These have really kind of varied in content and length, and we'll talk more about those in a little bit. But the other initiative is called Business Unusual. And for that, the Historical Society is asking business owners, business employees, customers, passersby, neighborhood residents, to the extent that it's safe to do so, to visually share their experiences so far of their businesses and the businesses that they frequent and how they've been impacted at this time. And part of the driver for this was really wanting to support and bring attention to Maryland businesses and the resiliency at this time.
Thank you, Catherine. Siobhan Hagan, would you talk to us about Archive This Moment DC at the DC Public Library?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Siobhan. So at DC Public Library, within our Special Collections Department, we launched our Archive This Moment DC in March. And we're basically collecting born digital, only digital materials and specifically photos, videos, also audio we're hoping to get, written submissions as well, text and like diary entries and things like that. Our main focus is on really engaging our public because as a public library, we're really used to doing a lot of in-person engagement. So we were really hoping and targeting this towards engaging our public virtually. And so we're also, we've been wanting to start a participatory archiving program for a while now, but we haven't really put a deadline on it or anything like that. And there's always too many things that were happening in the moment. We had scheduled to move all of our collections to our MLK recently renovated library in June. So that was the main thing on our plate. So we figure, well, we have this moment, we're gonna use this as a case study to figure out how to really do participatory archiving best. And our target audiences, as I sort of already mentioned, was really DC Public Library users. And we're very specifically keeping this to within the bounds of Washington, DC. So.
Thank you, Siobhan. Jen, could you talk to us about the collection at the NAB Center at Salisbury University? Oh, we may have lost Jen. We'll have to come back to her. It looks like she got disconnected. I can tell you that the NAB Center at the Salisbury University is collecting physical and born digital objects, including digital journals. Their audience is Salisbury students, faculty, and alumni who are all currently away from the campus as the campus is closed. So they are unique in that they are using an audience who is not directly around them. I think the rest of us are using our member base as a big, but also geographically located, and Salisbury is doing something different in that regard. Paige, could you tell us about your initiative at the Virginia Museum of History and Culture?
Yes, hi, I'm Paige. We are doing Share Your Story, documenting COVID-19 in Virginia, and we are asking for submissions from all Virginians from all over the state. And we're also asking for anything that's really documenting COVID-19. And we are obviously digital if we can. Current submissions that we've already gotten have been photographs and videos, but mainly it's been written submissions. So we're hoping to reach out and get more things as we all live through this time.
Thank you, Paige. So when we all started talking about putting this webinar together, we really realized that there are 4 big phases to creating a responsive collecting program. First, there's shaping your initiative, developing your workflow, publishing a call to action, and then the follow through. Throughout the process, you find that you have to evaluate and adapt, sometimes at each step, and especially after that last step. This usually will send you back through the other steps. This continual evaluation and adaptation will help you meet your project goals. The first step in creating a responsive collecting project is to define your scope and goals. What do you want to collect? Who are you collecting from? Why are you collecting this particular group of objects in these particular stories? And what do you hope to do with everything at the end? Kate, the Maryland Historical Society has 2 sub-projects, as you mentioned, under Collecting in Quarantine. Could you talk about the differences in the 2 and the goals of the 2?
Sure. Thanks, Sally. So really, we started out with our mission, and that was to, our initiative, like many, is really driven by this understanding that we're going through a unique moment in history and that our stories really need to be documented. And with our Maryland focus, we're really looking to a broad audience of Marylanders, people of all ages. So taking our mission, we again funneled that idea into our 2 sub-projects. Letters from the Home Front, as I mentioned, really was inspired by materials that we have in our collection and the types of materials that you as museum professionals, librarians, and archivists might be working with and helping to make available to researchers. So One of the examples that you can see that was submitted to this project is right here on the website, this drawing. This is a Baltimore artist, C. Ryan Patterson, who has been documenting his experience in comic form. But the responses that we've been receiving have really been very varied in content and in length as well. We've received submissions from elementary school students, high school students, people that are just sharing their observances of how life has changed in the day-to-day. There's a lot of worry about health, whether it's the health of oneself, the family members and loved ones, worries about their jobs. So it's really a sort of wide diversity of experiences. The other initiative, Business Unusual, as we mentioned, is focused on collecting images of businesses and how they're adapting in Maryland right now. And again, this was really driven by wanting to support and bring attention to Maryland businesses and their resiliency. So we've gotten examples from some of the kinds of submissions that have come through, or a distillery out in Frederick, Maryland is contributing photos of how they've adapted to pickup and takeout as a number of other restaurants have. But they're also now making and distributing surface disinfectant to medical facilities and essential businesses. There's a farm called Butterbee Farm, which was talking about how their supply chain has been impacted, and so how what that's caused is actually a demand for local flowers to increase, and they're trying to keep up with that. So all of these contributions we're beginning to share on our library's Underbelly blog. And so when you think about the mission and the goals, what we're considering is the goals have really impacted our structure that we've put into place and how we're making materials available. One of our goals was to share contributions in the present and allow people near and far to reflect on the experiences of others and find commonalities in some cases to their own experiences during this crisis, as well as to discover new perspectives that they might not have already considered. The other part that was really important for us was really thinking about that long-term archiving and wanting to make sure that stories and photographs, the selection of these are available for future generations to look back on and to research. Something that we find as you work with collections is you get to know their strengths often over time, but you also start to see the ways that they lack. And so we really have this great opportunity right now to reach out and try to get a wide variety of responses and perspectives. And we're going to talk more about the challenges to that too in a little bit.
Thank you, Catherine. And Siobhan, DC Public Library has a different focus for their responsive project in that you're focused on engagement and you're collecting not only through your website like the rest of us, but you're also collecting through social media. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Sure, yeah. So we shaped our initiative really, obviously in response to the current moment, but also, we shaped it so that it's an initiative that's able to scale. As I mentioned, we wanted to build something that was a case study for our future participatory archiving program. So, we specifically are calling it Archive This Moment DC and hashtag Archive This Moment DC. So that it could be scaled to be used for future collecting of historic events and moments in DC, which, that happens pretty frequently. It might not be something that affects literally everyone like the stay-at-home order right now, but it be some very DC specific. And then we also really wanted to reach out to our usual DCPL, public library users, and we were really thinking about where we could meet them. We wanted to meet them where they were. And a lot of them were on social media, right? So that's where we started looking into collecting from a hashtag. And we have Paul Kelly, who is our digital curation librarian. And very quickly he was like, yeah, I can pull the information, the metadata and media from Instagram and Twitter. So from that, we decided to collect specifically from a hashtag. That's how you submit, is just by putting the hashtag in on, and you have to have a public Instagram or a public facing Twitter account. And then we also share. So it's the hashtag is a collecting tool and then also a outreach tool. So we share and repost things on our Twitter and Instagram. And also, you know, the main goal for us was community building. That was really our main thing. And, but also, you know, figuring out participatory archiving as sort of a secondary aspect. And then honestly, something we didn't really expect is that we're also getting donor building and donor relationships established on a very small scale. Like, we're having photographers submit, both amateur and professional, and they're submitting stuff. And for us, we're looking, there's like tons of photographs from these 2 different photographers. And that's going to actually open up conversations in the future about maybe having them have their own collection. So while our goal was community building, it's really, there's so many like overlapping Venn diagram aspects that are going to be falling into other parts of our usual you know, workflows of collecting and within our special collections policies and things like that. So it's been a really big learning experience.
I think we're all finding that part of responsive collecting, a byproduct of it, is that we are reaching out to our community and we're kind of building relationships that we didn't necessarily realize would happen as a byproduct of these collecting initiatives. Knowing your audience, meaning those who will be submitting, can really shape your project. Who you are collecting from and who will engage with your collection in the future can help shape your call to action, your mechanism for collecting, and methods for sharing submissions. Paige, can you talk about your primary member base and some of the challenges you faced and how you shaped your initiative around those you were collecting?
So largely our member base tend to be older, and in Virginia and Virginians that don't live in Virginia anymore, we want to make it as easy as possible to, one, try and get the word out to our membership and to anyone in Virginia. So we've used an e-blast and social media for those types of things, in addition to press release. We hope to get the word out. With the older membership, we also wanted to make it easy. So if they weren't comfortable submitting online, they can give us a call. We've gotten calls. We've also gotten mail. Our building is open, not to the public, obviously, but some staff is in there. So I find out if someone's mailed something in, and they let me know. Also, for sharing the submissions, we have currently been using social media to share what we've been getting. And at this moment, it's mainly been written, like I mentioned, and also we've had some really great photographs come in and a couple of videos. Either they've shared a video they've made or through Facebook, something they posted on Facebook and shared with us.
That's fantastic. You know, one of the questions museum and libraries get a lot with responsive collecting is, what will you do with it? How do you explain your goal to your audience?
Lucky for us, we have a permanent exhibit called The Story of Virginia, and we do plan on incorporating items from this COVID collecting initiative to put in that exhibit, and also use it for future exhibits.
It's great that there's something that you can point to. I know a lot of us, it's like, we'll use it down the road.
Right. Well, we hope to get something up, you know, as soon as we can, you know,
yeah.
Finally open. Yeah.
Right. Jen, welcome back. You are in a unique position at Salisbury because the campus is closed. Unlike the other institutions here, your audience is also not defined by geography. Can you explain how that's defined your reach to your audience? I did give everyone a brief rundown of your initiative previously, but feel free to expand on that as well.
Okay. Thank you. Technical difficulties. So our student has been closed since March 14th when our spring break happened. So all of our students kind of dispersed across the state, across the country, across the world. So we really heavily relied on digital outreach. We sent an email at the beginning of spring break, you know, when you get back to campus, give us what you can. But since then, it's expanded to basically give us whatever you want relating to your experience with the pandemic. So it's really been hard to get donations just because we haven't had a physical location for people to feel like they could bring things in whenever they want to. And there's no real way to advertise to our followers except through email or social media. And right now our students are going through finals week, so they've been trying to tackle online courses. And so it's just been a real challenge of trying to figure out how to keep us in the forefront of their mind and actually contact people to get stuff.
Thank you. I would imagine that's one of the biggest challenges you have with your initiative. Often a combination of collecting methods are needed to have a successful responsive collecting initiative. And I think that everyone here has found that the more options, the better, or at least it can be beneficial. Could you each give a brief rundown of the different ways in which you're collecting? We'll go alphabetically by institution. So Siobhan, you're up first.
Great. Okay. So at DC Public Library, we are collecting, as I mentioned, through social media. But that's just Instagram and Twitter. And then we also have an Airtable form that we are collecting submissions through. And we started out with email, because we just wanted to launch very quickly everything. So we got some emails in, and then we decided to move away from email strictly through social media and through the Airtable form. So that was because we really wanted all of our submissions to have structured metadata, and so that we could really, since we're a smaller staff, we have 2 digital curation librarians, and I think our staff is maybe total 12. So full-time staff members, so which could be considered larger, but not everyone is working on this initiative. So the main thing for us is getting that structured data that gets spit out as a CSV or JSON. So then it won't take our digital curation librarians very long to transform that information into what we call our online platform for digital content is DigDC. So we just need to basically map the fields out. So that's why we moved away from email, so that we didn't, the massaging of the metadata was going to be less time and staff time intensive. So as far as, and then also we decided to just, since we're looking at digital participatory archiving programs, we're just moving to digital, and also that way, digital submissions, not physical submissions. So that way we don't have to worry, especially since we're all working in a digital environment right now, it seemed to make the most sense to us. And I did see out there some questions about our specific workflows for social media. So I'll just try and run through those real quickly about the tools that we use. For our social feed manager for Twitter, and that was developed by GW University. We have a specific collection from Twitter that is about very specific COVID-19 collecting, and this actually ends up in DigDC and is in DigDC right now, but it's embargoed. So, and so that sort of answers that, it's embargoed for right now, and then we're gonna kind of see how that goes down the line, but we are preserving it and do plan on making it accessible. So the content from that is separate from the Archives This Moment DC. And so that one is more of a big data digital humanities project. So this one, is very much a data set that you get from Twitter, and it doesn't include any media. So if they have photos that they've included from Twitter, so that's actually where you need to be very familiar, not very, but familiar, intermediate level with command line, because you need to do some wizardry there to mass download the media that goes with it. Instagram, on the other hand, we use a Python library called Instagram Scraper. And so luckily everything from there, the metadata and the media gets pulled together, so we don't have to do that individually. And then unlike Twitter, or also we have a web archiving program. So we use Internet Archive's Archive It service. So that's the tool that's not free. So we are also collecting new websites that have to deal with DC health issues and things like that. So that's separate, but I just also want to say they're very related, and it is sort of participatory, where we do ask for suggestions for what websites to collect from the public.
Thank you, Siobhan. And I do see we're getting a lot of great questions coming through. I think some will be answered throughout the presentation, but we will be sure to circle back to everyone. I'm seeing some really great questions coming through. So keep it up, guys. Catherine Mayfield, Maryland Historical Society. Could you give us a rundown of the ways that we are collecting data?
Sure. So our process has really been an evolving one. We started out with a form that we had built through our own website, as well as we began collecting through emails in a similar situation to what Siobhan described, where our institution wanted to begin collecting very quickly. So that is how we started, and email has really been the bulk of how our submissions have come through. And we had received some feedback that the form really wasn't so easy to use, especially for businesses and people that were out working in essential businesses. And so email has for sure been an important method for us to collect. It definitely creates more of a workload on our staff end, because there is a lot of follow-up, and again, also making sure that we have the metadata that we need. One thing that we did do is we reworked our form, and we're now using a new platform, Airtable, and that's very much credit and thanks to the DC Public Library. And that form we really like it on the back end, and it's very easy to use on the front as well. One thing as we began exploring forms is that we found with Google, as I was testing out some forms online, I'd see that if I wasn't signed into my own Google account, then I was getting a message saying, you need to sign in. And so I could see how for some people that might be a barrier. We decided that for our particular audience, we wanted to give them multiple options for submitting. So for right now, we've got the form option, we've got the email. I do notice in some other institutions, there are even more ways of contributing. History Colorado has an interesting initiative. They've got a survey that you can complete through form format, and it asks very pointed questions. They say that you can submit your written accounts through email, and they provide a journal template, or you can leave a voicemail to submit a story. So lots of different options for contributing.
Thanks, Catherine. Jen Peebles, would you like to talk to us about what you're doing at Salisbury?
Sure. So Salisbury has a subscription to Qualtrics, and it's an online survey that you can build. So our technology librarian and I reworked our deed of gift form that we usually use at the NAB Center to build an online form. Like many others, we started with that initial email of save, send, drop it off when we're open. But since then, we've expanded to include physical and digital materials. So once you complete the donation form online, it will ask you if you have physical, digital, or both materials. And if you click digital, then it will send you to a Dropbox request file folder, and then you can upload as much, as little as you want right then. And you can go back to it later if you have more to submit later on. And I think it's kind of worked well because we don't have to worry about email sizes, worrying about the file size, and the Qualtrics also makes it very mobile friendly, so hopefully our students will take advantage of that. And it also has the option to have a automatic confirmation email sent. So once that submission form is received, it'll send it back and say, here's our address if you have physical things to mail to, here's the Dropbox URL if you need to go back and upload later.
I would imagine that being able to send things from your phone is something that is really important, especially when everyone is out and about. Paige, could you talk to us about your methods of collecting at the Virginia Museum of History and Culture?
Sure. So we have a web form in on our web page itself on our site, and that's one way. In addition, we've offered there's a email address, so they have a choice whether they want to. We've gotten both ways. So either through our web form on our web page, you can submit images or videos, which we use WeTransfer for that. Also through our email, you can send us images too. We have gotten physical submissions and email directly either to myself or to another colleague. And we've also gotten phone calls, like I'd mentioned. Sometimes when I've contacted the person because they've mentioned wanting to donate an object, they also have my phone number and email. And I'm also able to go pick up items locally if that's a possibility. In fact, we already had one object. It was through Strange Ways Brewing, a local brewery here in Richmond. And I was able to go pick up 2 beer cans. They have a beer can label that says COVID-19 sucks, S-U-X. So that was our first object submission. And I was able to bring it into the building, so it's secure. Yeah.
Great. I know that a lot of us don't have buildings open, so that's definitely an advantage that you can actually bring items in.
Yes, it is.
There are many questions you should ask yourself when you're developing your workflow. How will you track submission? What staff will be responsible? Will you follow up with donors? Do you have the storage capacity for the material that you're intending to collect? Will you publish the submissions? If so, how? How will you get rights and permissions? And I know I'm looking in the Q&A and we have a lot of questions about rights, permissions, and digital deeds of gift. Catherine, how does MDHS handle the tracking? With email being the primary collecting method, what does the tracking of taking material, obtaining permissions, and deeds of gift work?
So for us, in terms of the tracking, what we did is we developed a spreadsheet, or actually 2 initially, that we were using for our initiatives. And these have all the essential metadata that we need: a contributor's name, what their preferred display name is, because perhaps they want to be documented with their first name or anonymously, contact method, description about what they're sharing, as well as fields and columns about our sharing and archiving permissions. So we put that together, again, just quickly based on what we knew we needed to document for the purposes of getting back in touch with the contributors or documenting metadata. But there is a great template available through the Society of American Archivists. So they have a documenting in times of crisis toolkit that is available online. And it's a spreadsheet example that you can adapt to your own purposes. So that's a great thing to go and take a look at. Since starting to use Airtable, what happens when you have submissions come through to that is that the metadata comes into a spreadsheet, as well as thumbnails of the images that were contributed. So we're in the process of combining our spreadsheets so that we have one to work from. And that's what we've been doing for those tracking purposes. And in terms of permissions, right now, again, this is an evolving process, but what we had been doing is for the submissions through email, we've been asking for those digital permissions to share online on our website, our underbelly, on social media. And then we are taking a little bit of time to assess, to figure out what do we want to archive long-term. And we are following up with the deed of gift for those. And I think we're going to be talking more about the deed of gifts in a little bit. But that is our process for the email submissions. And then using the new form through Airtable, all of the permissions and the deed of gift are kind of built into that. So when somebody submits something, they will need to check off that they agree to the terms and conditions for the digital sharing. And then from there are further options for the long-term permissions.
Thanks, Catherine. Siobhan, I know that you've touched on this briefly, talking about your workflow for the initiative and getting objects into the Dig DC. What does the workflow look like when you're collecting from social media?
Yeah, sure. I saw it like in the questions a lot.
Yeah,
asking
you're following along.
Yeah, a lot about our rights and permissions aspect of the social media part. So just I'll try and address that. So maybe hopefully it'll answer the questions a bit. The main thing, like I said, very similarly with that Kate mentioned about the Airtable first, is that we do have the permissions listed there. Like you have to click a box. And basically we have a link out where people who's submitting, they can read our like typical terms of service. And we're kind of thinking about, you know, when you sign up for a YouTube account or a Twitter account or Instagram, you look at their terms of service. So we're kind of looking at that like that. We also want to just make sure that we, you know, it's an opt-in, not an opt-out kind of thing for that. We just want to make sure that people understand what we want to use their content for and how we would use it. We're not trying to get the rights. That's like something I think that is very different for our initiative. We are, however, so since we're really not sending out deeds of gift, I did mention briefly, like when we see submissions where we're seeing a lot of photographs from professional photographers coming in, and if they put in their notes box, all rights reserved, and it's really hitting our mission overall in general for our collecting, you know, for like selection criteria for our mission, then we will reach out, and that'll be a separate thing where we will do the deed of gift. But for this, we're not trying to get rights. We feel really comfortable if these are public Twitter and public Instagram accounts that they have read our call to action, and they see that we are going to reuse these and post these items. We feel very confident that this is we are able to use these, and then also we say that we are going to preserve them as well. Now, we are also fully ready to take anything down should anyone come back to us and say, hey, I really don't feel comfortable about this anymore. I actually deleted my Twitter account, and I don't feel like I want that. That was not represent, you know, we are potentially open to that, or ask them about embargoing it, and things like that. So there are ways for us to have it be also, you know, only viewable in person or with a certain login. So those are, you know, typical things that we do, that you might do with a collection that you don't get the rights to. We're trying to follow that workflow. So hopefully that answers some questions about that. We're really leaning on the fact that of fair use, and that these are public accounts.
And of course, your hashtag is very unique. Archive This Moment DC is very unique, and all of the submissions have only started appearing on there since you kicked off your initiative. So there's some understanding that they understand the project if they're contributing to that very specific hashtag.
Yes, thanks.
So as we've been talking about, rights and permissions of born digital collections can kind of be daunting. Based on the number of questions we're getting on, I can see that everyone is facing the same challenge. Someone is just writing you an email, so how is it considered an item? What does it mean to obtain rights to a web page? Museums and libraries are tackling this very tricky issue in many ways. Checkbox permissions and digital deeds of gift for full rights, levels of permission, not taking any permission. The avenues of tackling privacy issues are a lot to be considered. You've heard from Catherine and Siobhan on what they did. Paige, could you have the checkbox asking the user to acknowledge material that is being gifted to the museum, as well as physical objects where you can follow up with deeds of gift? How did you develop the language that is associated that goes with your checkbox? And how have you followed up with anyone who has submitted? Like, have you gone to that extra step?
So what we did, we modified our deeded gift for this, and you can read it. You check the box, or you can read the modified deeded gift on the website. So that's basically all we've done. And actually the bottom image is from our webpage. And if you're under 18, we've had quite a few submissions from students. We do ask for their parent or guardian's email too. So if we choose to use it, we can check with the parents or the guardian. One submission was images of storefronts in Carytown, which is sort of a retail part near between the Fan and the Museum District in Richmond. And we had Virginia Living, we had a great article come out in Virginia Living magazine, and they wanted images to see what else types of submissions we'd received already. So I reached out to the person who'd submitted the images just as common courtesy, even though she gave us the right to use it. But I just wanted to make her aware, just to double check. And she thankfully said yes. So
yeah, I think it's great that you went the extra step, because again, we're building relationships with these initiatives. And I think that that person probably really appreciated that extra step.
Yes.
So again, they've already signed the rights. It's sometimes nice just to let them know, even if that their work is being published. A lot of times they're happy for the platform.
Yes, exactly.
Jen, you have an interesting clause in your submissions. Could you talk about that? And I believe you're also collecting demographic information. Can you talk about the use of that?
Sure. So we do have 2 clauses in our donation form offering submitters to remain anonymous or have an embargo for up to a maximum of 10 years. We decided to put a cap on it just so people didn't go crazy and say, you know, I don't want it seen for 100 years. But we did that just so that our students and faculty and staff would feel more comfortable about actually donating. We didn't want the barrier of, these are my personal thoughts, I'm scared for my name to get out there, attached to these thoughts, and just give them that opportunity to still donate and feel comfortable that their privacy is going to be remain intact if they so choose. And we are collecting demographic information, mostly just their affiliation with the university and where they are located now, since we are dispersed across the world. And the thought process behind that was just so that we could collect that metadata up front. A lot of issues in our profession come from, you know, who was this person? Where were they? Was it even a male or female? That kind of stuff. So we decided to just kind of grab a little bit of information up front just to make it easier. And it also helps us, if someone does choose to remain anonymous, we can say, you know, this is a journal from a sophomore student in Arkansas, and have it more generalized, but also give a little bit more context. And it also kind of allows us to see gaps. So if we only get submissions from students, we might in the future reach out to our faculty and say, hey, do you have anything that you want to donate to kind of fill in those gaps? And that's why we pick those.
Yeah, I mean, that's great, especially for people who want to remain anonymous. I mean, this is very personal stuff that a lot of people are going through. We've had submissions, and I'm sure everyone else has, with people who want to remain anonymous. Siobhan, I know you've briefly touched on this, but again, privacy is especially tricky, especially with health concerns and with social media, if there's pictures of multiple people or something. Could you talk about some of the challenges that you've been facing?
Yes, absolutely. I know Jen also, I think, can talk about some of the like health privacy aspects of this. But for us, just as an example that popped up recently that we honestly don't really have an answer for, but I just want to like give it as something that you might have to tackle, or you will have to tackle.
Yeah, almost definitely.
You will. For example, someone sent in through the Airtable form a really lovely screenshot of their DC, their neighborhood book club that they formed out of their library, and so you can see everyone's face and everyone's name, but only one person submitted it, and so we did. You know, what about the? And there's a good like 15 people, so. How are we gonna get the permissions? Because what if one person out of that 15 doesn't want to have their name and face involved, and people know that they're part of that book club for one reason or another? So, you know, and I don't have an easy answer for that one. I think that that's gonna kind of go through an appraisal process, and then thinking about embargoing it is probably gonna be our answer.
Seems like the embargo is helping a lot of us.
A nice catch-all. Yeah,
it is. Catherine, you talked about this briefly. The deed of gift for this material needed to be very flexible for us at the Maryland Historical Society. Could you share, again, some of the experiences? And I know you talked about the resources with the spreadsheet, but also with the deed of gift.
Sure. So what we did for this is, again, we turned to the SAA's Documenting in Times of Crisis Toolkit. So huge thank you to the SAA and its Tragedy Response Initiative Task Force, because the resources there have been so very helpful for this. And so the template that the SAA has there for their deed of gift has a few different options for rights. The contributor can transfer all of the rights, they can transfer some of the rights, or there is an option there for no transfer of rights, but instead allowing a certain amount of permissions, and the institution can recommend these. Like we know we want to be able to do some of our basic functions of reformatting, digitizing, making materials available for research, exhibiting, that type of thing. So that's what we ended up using and modifying for our purposes. You can find that on our website. If you go to our collecting initiative and then click on the form itself, there's a PDF embedded in there about that, or featuring that deed of gift. There's also another letter that we've created that explains the rights and why we ask for these. So our preference as an institution is a transfer of rights to be able to facilitate research into the future, but that is not at all something that we require, and we wanted to have that flexibility and these different options available there for contributors. So the other resource that I'd say has been really helpful in this as well is looking online at what other institutions are doing and just kind of examining their policies about terms and conditions, and looking at what deeds of gift they've been using.
Thanks, Catherine. I'm going to let our panelists know that we are at 1:49. So as we go forward, I do want time for questions at the end. I'm just not telling you to keep it short, but I'm just letting you know of our time. One of the trickiest things about responsive collecting is that you have to act fast. For a successful call to action, you need to be clear, think about the platform or platforms that you're publishing on, and the multiple places that you need to use to maximize outreach. Paige, what was it like crafting your call to action within your organization? How many people were kind of involved in that process?
So it was pretty much about 7 of us, and because we wanted to roll this out as quickly as possible. So by May 30th, we had everything pretty much together. And that was between collections and marketing and IT, just to kind of suss out what that workflow would be.
Thank you.
Working well so far, yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot of different departments working together to get it off the ground. Siobhan, as public library, how was this process different for creating your image? I know that you've talked a little bit about that.
Yeah, so with public libraries, usually our audiences, we contact them in person through flyers at their branch, their local branches, or like word of mouth. There are some newsletters, that we reach out to people through, so we continue to do that. But we tried to work extremely closely, as we normally do, but even more so with our communications department, which was really huge to have. We only had about 3 staff members from our department working on the outreach part, but we looked into friends of the library groups, neighborhood associations. We had a staff member actually create we didn't ask her to do this, but she did it anyway. She created her own public Instagram account to show people what we were looking for with the Instagram hashtag. So she took, photos around her neighborhood, and that was really huge to get the word out for people to be like, oh, I see that they posted this type of content. I'm going to do that as well.
Thank you. So you've shaped your project, creating your flawless workflow, checked your capacity for hardware and staff bandwidth, and crafted your message. And then you published. So what's next? This is probably the most important part, making sure that you are reaching your audience. And sometimes this can be a lot of work. Catherine, could you talk about the lengths that MCHS had to go to connect to people across the state?
Sure. So what we've been doing as one part of outreach is making materials available online through our blog. That's been one way to share them. And then our social media manager has been posting to social media, Facebook, Instagram. And so the collection and the project are out there. But the other part is we're really lucky to have a community engagement manager, Martha Osterbiel, who's wonderful and really works on development of community partnerships and offsite programs, and it's been really integral to our outreach. This really gets to this bandwidth issue that's very real of, with everything that you're doing already, do you have the time and energy for outreach? For us in the collections department, not so much. We've been able to take in submissions and make them available online through our blog, do all of the tracking, the permissions. So the outreach bit, we ourselves have not been able to focus on, and so we've been really lucky to have Martha's help on this. She has been doing targeted outreach to businesses, really starting in Baltimore, which is where we're located, and other staffers throughout our organization have been sharing about the project as well with people in their own networks, emailing, messaging on Instagram. Martha has also been reaching out to industries and thinking about our Business Unusual project and how different industries have been impacted. So she's reached out to members of the agricultural industry, for example. And then there's also reaching out to peers. So she's done outreach to actually use Constant Contact to send out an email blast to other libraries, museums, and historical societies in our area and beyond. One thing that came out of this outreach is actually a partnership with the Baltimore Sun. And so this is a newer development for us where they were working on a similar project, also collecting stories. And so what they're going to be doing is sharing a selection of those stories that they've collected with us, where they have those permissions from the contributors, and vice versa. We'll also be doing the same where we have permission from our contributors to share back with them. So those are some of the methods of outreach that we've been doing. But, one thing I want to say here with outreach, and I think that's really important to consider, is just the reality of what we're doing right now, and that this is an incredibly challenging time on so many different levels, and for some more so than others, for sure. As people are battling illness, have illness in their families, being socially isolated, worried about their livelihood and more. There's so many anxieties and stressors. And so that, ability to even sit down and take the time to reflect and contribute something back is something that not everyone is able to do or should do right now. So that's something that we're aware of when we think about how we really want to be representative of Maryland, and there's a lot more that we will need to be doing and thinking about. And so that's part of our discussion as an institution.
Thank you, Catherine. You mentioned allies, using the Baltimore Sun to help us collect and other people in the industry to help us collect, to gather stories into one place. Jen, you also use allies to get your mission out there. Could you talk about that?
Yeah, so luckily we decided to start collecting while the semester was still going, and it was fairly early in the semester. So some of our professors picked up on this project and based some of the coursework around this collection. One of our communication professors asked his students to create video blogs for their final projects in specialized reporting class, and that's where all of our submissions so far has come from. And we also reached out to our alumni association and the library itself to help promote our social media posts, since the archive is embedded within the Edward H. Knabb Research Center for Delmarva History and Culture. So a lot of our following may not necessarily fit within our collection community. So we're really depending on the library and the alumni association, as well as campus-wide emails, to really focus in and reach our audience.
Thank you. One of the most challenging aspects of creating these initiatives is that you have to put something out there before it's tested, vetted, worked on for a few months. Museum and libraries, we like to really work on something a long time before it's ready to see the light of day. That's why adaptability in your process, evaluating what works and what doesn't, finding ways to problem solve in real time is very crucial. Does anyone have stories? I should say everyone is going to have stories about some of these obstacles that we face, because this is a very fluid process. Again, I'm going to go alphabetically by institution. Siobhan, you're up first. I'm also letting everyone know we're at 1:57. After this, we're going to take some questions and answers. So we're going to go a little over an hour. Go ahead, Siobhan.
Okay, great. Yeah, I'd say the biggest challenge that we've had to deal with is unexpected calls for just unexpected anything, whether it's illness or, for example, illness from staff. And then also we were told that we had to move one of our moves up by several weeks. And we had just launched the initiative, and one of our main staff members who was working on it then had to get pulled in that other direction and really refocus. So that sort of made answering some of these questions like, we're going to have to do that later. We're going to focus on collecting right now.
Thank you. Catherine.
Sure. So this whole process has been a big learning one. And again, because our institution really wanted to begin collecting right away. And I would have loved the time to sit and study and really test and vet. And that wasn't our reality, and which is okay, but it's meant just being open to being flexible and adapting. And I think that, we've really learned from what has come into us, and we had received some memes, for example, and some institutions are really focusing on collecting those and other kinds of content. And we're really focusing on the personal contributions created by the submitters themselves. So that was something that we learned as we began receiving submissions. The other thing is just, again, adapting and being okay with it being a process that we are continuing to improve. I think that's just a lesson in any kind of programming, is assessing, evaluating, and adapting as needed.
Thanks, Catherine. Jen, what can you tell us about some challenges you faced?
So our main challenge has been the outreach, just because our audience has been so focused on everything else with switching to online learning, and not necessarily having that original social media base to reach out to. But I also wanted to hit on the medical privacy. That was also a big challenge up front, because we were trying to figure out, do we even include it? How do we phrase? Should it even be a separate agreement? So you really kind of just have to figure out what you want, and what you think people will be comfortable with. And we went with just a statement in our information page saying, please don't write about your personal information, your medical history, other people's medical history. But if you feel more comfortable having that clause of, I allow my medical information that is in my submission to be shared, then I would highly recommend adding that.
That's a great point. And I know that we have gotten submissions from people who are sharing a loved one's story, and that adds an extra layer of complication, because it's not their history, it's someone else's that they're putting out there. Paige, at the Virginia Museum of History and Culture, could you talk about some of your challenges?
Sure. I mean, it's hard usually with our audience and donations. So right off the bat, we had someone submit just telling us they're keeping a journal and they're going to donate it after, whenever that is, which is great. And making that connection, I follow up with them and just have that reminder of that I've got to follow up, maybe every month, just to keep touching base. Another person said that they were keeping a journal and they would possibly be open to donation. When I reached out, the person was like, oh, I was going to keep it for my children, but I'll think about it. And then another was someone reached out actually through a phone call. They wanted to donate a 1918 influenza letter of their grandmother. And come to find out that our initiative really, talking to us and figuring out that letter belonged in another state. So that letter is now being donated to where it belongs. So I guess it's finding out how to find that balance, trying to meaningful collecting and still keep that connection, since we're not face to face, and it's really being available and learning day to day, because there's always something new. And how do we deal with these right now?
Yeah, that's true. And I think that's one of the reasons we all tried to get out early, is because everything is changing all the time. And we do have that challenge of collecting. Remember to keep this a priority at the end.
Yes.
But when the world is normal again, we have to remember to go back and reconnect with all of these people.
Yes.
Thank you to our panelists for the expert advice on creating successful responsive collecting initiatives. We're now going to take some of those questions in the Q&A box. Anything that we don't have time to tackle, we're going to send to our presenters who will provide answers, and we'll send it in an email follow-up later. Let me pull up some questions here. I'm just going to throw these out to the group, and whoever would like to talk about it can. How diverse have your donors been, racially, economically, age, and language? Have you had success in building relationships with especially fragile communities, specifically undocumented or temporary immigrants as an example? I know that we've struggled with this at the Maryland Historical Society. We use our allies, people who are doing collecting initiatives in their own communities, and we reach out to those community leaders in hopes that we can get material, but it's been limited success so far. How's everyone else been working?
Pretty much the same. I think we need to do more outreach, to like targeted outreach, as was mentioned. I think because we want responses and submissions to keep coming in, but it's hard to compete with everything that's going on in people's own lives. That it's just stay relevant in a way. Yeah.
Jen, there's a question here specifically for you. When you sent out an email about collecting responses, were you able to email from the library to the entire student body?
So we actually had the Dean of Libraries send out the email, and it reached the faculty, staff, and students. So yeah, it did go campus-wide, but I didn't personally do it. We figured it might sound better coming from our dean.
Okay, how are you keeping up with continued engagement to get more results, yet not doing too much so that you are not annoying or causing fatigue in your audience? Where's the line, pretty much? Anybody want to talk about that?
I don't know yet. I mean, honestly, when, like I mentioned, like when submissions aren't coming in, it's like, okay, I got to reach out. We need to start reaching out more. But is it us? Is it them? Is it just the way things are at the moment? And it just will come in waves and not just a constant, daily emails or submissions.
Yeah, I'd say that we're still feeling the same way of feeling it out, and just again, it comes back to that bandwidth issue. And I just remember that first week of working from home and feeling like I got hit by a truck, of adapting to the stress of the new situation, juggling 2 children at home, and it just being really challenging. And so one way that we handle this with our project is we don't have one particular staffer really all in on this. We have the responsibilities spread out across about 4 or 5 people, and that really helps because we're able to continue some of our regular day-to-day activities as well as work on this project. It creates some variety. And again, Paige, you mentioned this, that personal connection with people has been a really wonderful silver lining to this. Because we are, we generally miss our researchers, the students that we work with. Others we're responding by email, but we have there's a huge difference in our interaction with people. And it's been a really nice collection and sort of project to be able to connect with donors and potential contributors.
Yeah.
I think we touched on this briefly, but is anyone offering to put restrictions on materials submitted by donor? I think that most of us are leaving that flexible. When everyone was planning their initiatives, did you involve other parts of your organization, such as communications, or has all the information been supplied by you and not received help from any other department?
Takes the teamwork to make the dream work, as they say. Yeah.
That was the key for our communications department, which also helps with the fatigue aspect. We're relying on them to kind of give us those cues as well.
Yeah, and same with us.
We had about 5 different departments involved.
Our support, there's support from the top that trickles down and has been so key to making this happen.
Mm-hmm. Here's a question. What cloud-based dam systems do you use?
So at the Maryland Historical Society, we're using resource-based, and this is something that is more newly implemented for us. One of the ongoing projects we've been working on has been a redesign of our site, and so that is going to be integrating into that.
Is anyone else using? It's Siobhan.
Yeah, sorry, I'm muted. Yeah, so for us, we call it DigDC, would be our access for digital collections, and that is an Islandora. Yeah, based on Islandora. So, and then, I mean, we also use something different for our actual preservation. That's through WRLC, which is the Washington Research Library Consortium, which is a really interesting model. You should look it up.
Okay, we'll do one last question. Has anyone received digital surrogates for physical donations? And if so, how are you handling this? Because you have both the digital and physical originals. How are you handling collecting the digital if the physical is what you would like to keep in the end? Does anyone have that issue?
Not yet. Yeah, not yet. I mean, I would like the original photographs, but I mean, they were taken digitally. There's no,
yeah, the cartoons that were earlier in the slide package were sent to us digitally. And so we were planning on keeping it as a digital item.
Yes, which is not, you want the original if you choose to exhibit, and maybe, and that could be another conversation, or in the future with that donor.
Mm-hmm. One last question, because I'm not sure if we have an answer. What is a way we can connect with populations that might not have access to digital forms? What kind of outreach that isn't digital could be considered? I know this is a question that we ask ourselves constantly, because how do we do this when we're all at home to collect physical things? Does anyone have any ideas they've been bouncing around on this before we go? And it's a tough one.
It is a tough.
Yeah, for us, I mean, it's part of our selection criteria is that it's digital only at this point. I mean, I think that it's not like we wouldn't take, if someone had a journal that they had kept and came to us later, I don't think that we would take that, but yeah, it just wouldn't be part of this particular initiative. It would just be separate.
Right. This webinar is about the digital age, because this unique moment we're kind of forced into that digital world, and how we represent the communities that are not able to use digital, to use the assets that we're giving them. I think that that's something that we need to know about and approach when we can. But currently, with that global health crisis, we really have to focus on the digital side.
I mean,
Sorry. Thank you everyone for these wonderful questions. There are still a bunch in there, so we're going to send them to our panelists and have them answer them, so that you can still have the answers later, and it will be returned to you in an email. We thank you so much for joining us here today, and we hope that you learned something. And if you have any more questions, we do have all of the contact information in the slide package that you will receive, so please feel free to reach out to anyone to get those answers. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
See you.